Tom Harrington wiped sweat from his brow as he finished repairing the fence on his rural 5-acre property. 15 years of hard work had transformed this once neglected land into his personal sanctuary. The sprawling oak trees, the vegetable garden that produced enough to share with half the neighborhood, and most importantly, the crystal-clear well water that visitors always commented on. All of it represented the peaceful life he'd built after retiring from the Boston Fire Department. The sold sign that appeared on the neighboring property last week had given him mixed feelings. The land had sat vacant for nearly 3 years after old Mr. Jenkins passed away, and while Tom appreciated the solitude, he missed having a neighbor to chat with over the property line. He watched as a shiny black Mercedes SUV pulled into the driveway next door, looking comically out of place among the rural surroundings. A woman emerged wearing designer sunglasses and clothing that suggested she hadn't planned for the dusty country roads. She introduced herself as Karen Westfield, a recent devotee from the city who wanted a simpler life away from all the drama. Tom helped her carry in some boxes, and during that first afternoon, Karen asked dozens of questions about the area, the neighbors, and particularly about utilities. Well water? How quaint, she exclaimed when Tom mentioned his private well. Is it reliable? My realtor mentioned something about the water table here being unpredictable. Never had a problem in 15 years, Tom replied proudly. Drilled 200 feet down. Purest water you'll ever taste. He noticed how Karen's eyes lingered on his well housing, but thought nothing of it at the time. She seemed friendly enough, bringing over expensive wine a few days later and commenting on how lovely it was to have such a handy neighbor nearby. Tom had no idea that behind Karen's practiced smile and flattery, she was already formulating a plan that would upend the peaceful community and test his resolve in ways he never imagined. 2 months into Karen's residence, Tom noticed the first troubling signs. His morning shower, once a powerful, invigorating spray, now delivered little more than a trickle. Initially, he blamed the aging pump, but when his quarterly utility statement showed a staggering 340% increase in electricity consumption, he knew something was seriously wrong. Doesn't make any sense, he muttered, running his finger down the columns of numbers. The well pump was working overtime, but he wasn't using any more water than usual. While inspecting his well equipment, Tom noticed something he'd missed before, a thin trail of disturbed earth running from his well housing toward Karen's property. Following the suspicious path, he discovered fresh tire tracks that didn't match his own vehicles, cutting across the corner of his land where no one had permission to drive. Tom's neighbor on the other side, Mike Sanderson, stopped by that afternoon to return a borrowed ladder. You know, Mike said hesitantly, I saw something weird last week. That new lady next door had some guys out here with shovels and plastic piping early in the morning. They were working near your property line. I assumed you knew about it. That evening, Tom took his flashlight and followed the suspicious trail, carefully removing the artfully arranged brush and fallen leaves that concealed what lay beneath. His stomach tightened as he uncovered a professional-grade plastic pipe, barely buried, running directly from his well system to Karen's property. The connection had been made with expensive fittings that suggested this was no amateur job. Whoever had installed this had known exactly what they were doing. This wasn't desperation, but calculated theft. Taking dozens of photographs in the fading light, Tom discovered that the illegal line ran straight to Karen's elaborate new garden, complete with water features and sprinkler systems that ran continuously, even during rainstorms. He remembered her mentioning at the last HOA meeting how gardening had become her therapy after her divorce. What she hadn't mentioned was that she'd found a way to make Tom pay for her expensive new hobby. Tom spent a sleepless night deliberating over how to approach Karen. As a former firefighter, he'd dealt with plenty of confrontational situations, but this felt different, more personal. By morning, he prepared himself and gathered all his evidence in a folder. Taking a deep breath, he walked next door and rang the bell at precisely 9 a.m. Karen answered wearing yoga clothes and a surprised expression. Tom, what a pleasant surprise. I was just about to do my morning meditation. I need to talk to you about something serious, Tom said, his voice level but firm. May I come in? Karen's smile faltered slightly, but she stepped aside to let him enter her immaculately decorated home. The interior looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine, not what one expected in a modest rural development. "I discovered something disturbing," Tom began, laying out the photographs on her gleaming quartz countertop. "Someone has illegally connected a water line from my well to your property. My water pressure has dropped significantly, and my electric bill has skyrocketed from my pump working overtime." Karen's transformation was instantaneous and chilling. The friendly facade vanished, replaced by cold calculation. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, barely glancing at the photos. "Perhaps your well is failing. I've heard that happens in this area." Tom pointed to a particularly clear image showing the connection point. "Karen, this is professional work. The pipe runs directly from my well to your garden. No one else would have reason to do this." After several minutes of denials, Karen's strategy shifted when she realized Tom wouldn't back down. "Fine," she snapped, her voice taking on a shrill edge. "My well isn't producing enough water for my needs. The previous owner clearly misrepresented the property. What was I supposed to do? Let my investment in this landscaping die?" "You were supposed to address your water issues legally," Tom replied, "not steal from your neighbor." "Steal is such an ugly word," Karen said, her voice suddenly honey-sweet again. "I was just borrowing a little water until my situation improves. You have plenty. It's just sitting there in the ground. Don't be so selfish." When Tom insisted the connection be removed immediately, Karen's demeanor changed again. Her face reddened, and she jabbed a manicured finger toward his chest. "Do you have any idea who I am? My ex-husband is an attorney with Webster & Klein. One phone call, and I could make your life very difficult." "What you've done is illegal, Karen," Tom said calmly. "Theft and trespassing, at minimum. I'm giving you 48 hours to remove that connection and make restitution for the water and electricity you've used, or I'll be contacting the county authorities." Karen's laugh was cold. "Good luck with that. I've already made friends with half the county board. Who do you think they'll believe? A retired nobody or someone who just donated $10,000 to the mayor's re-election campaign?" As Tom turned to leave, Karen called after him. "By the way, I noticed your shed is 3 inches over the setback requirement, and that oak tree you love so much, diseased and dangerous, according to the arborist I hired last week. I'm filing complaints with the HOA tomorrow. 2 can play at this game, Tom." 3 days later, Tom found himself sitting in the community center as Karen dramatically presented her case to the HOA board. In the months since moving in, she had ingratiated herself with several board members, hosting cocktail parties and offering free interior design consultations. Now she leveraged those connections masterfully. "Tom Harrington is vindictively targeting me because I rejected his inappropriate advances," Karen announced to the stunned room. Gasps and murmurs followed her calculated statement. Tom felt his face flush with anger and embarrassment as neighbors he'd known for years glanced at him with newfound suspicion. Karen continued her performance, presenting altered photos suggesting Tom's property violated multiple HOA regulations. She ended by dabbing at crocodile tears while describing how unsafe she felt living next to someone so volatile. When Tom's turn came to speak, he forced himself to remain calm, aware that losing his temper would only reinforce Karen's narrative. "I'd like to address the actual issue at hand," he began, connecting his laptop to the room's projector. 3 months ago, Karen hired contractors to illegally tap into my private well." He methodically presented his evidence. Original, time-stamped photographs, utility bills showing the suspicious spike in usage, and statements from 2 witnesses who had seen the work being done. Finally, he played a recording of his conversation with Karen, legally made under the state's one-party consent laws, in which she essentially admitted to the theft. As for the personal accusations, Tom concluded, looking directly at Karen, they are completely false and defamatory. I've never been anything but neighborly until discovering this illegal activity. The HOA president, Eleanor Washington, a retired judge known for her no-nonsense approach, called for a brief recess. When the meeting reconvened, her expression was grave. The board has reviewed the evidence and finds that Ms. Westfield has indeed violated HOA covenants regarding property boundaries and utilities. Furthermore, her actions likely constitute criminal offenses that fall outside our jurisdiction. Eleanor fixed Karen with a stern look. The board directs you to immediately remove all unauthorized connections to Mr. Harrington's water supply, reimburse him for documented losses, and restore any disturbed property to its original condition. Failure to comply within 7 days will result in maximum fines and potential expulsion from the association. Karen's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. I've done nothing wrong. You're all just jealous of my success. This entire community is stuck in the dark ages. As she stormed out, slamming the door behind her, Eleanor turned to Tom. You might want to consider a more secure setup for your well, Tom, and document everything going forward. I have a feeling this isn't over. How right she was. The 7-day deadline came and went with no action from Karen. Instead, Tom discovered to his horror that she had doubled down on her water theft. Not only had she not removed the illegal connection, but she had installed a commercial-grade pump to increase the water flow to her property. His own water pressure had dropped so dramatically that he could barely get enough water to shower. Immediately after discovering the pump, Tom's security system alerted him to movement near the well housing. The cameras he'd installed captured Karen tampering with his equipment in broad daylight, seemingly unconcerned about being caught. Tom called his friend Daniel, who practiced law in the next county. This has gone beyond a neighborhood dispute, Daniel advised after reviewing the evidence. You're dealing with grand theft, criminal trespassing, and potentially even destruction of property. But you need to protect yourself first. Following Daniel's advice, Tom hired Mason Plumbing Services to install an elaborate system modification. The crew worked efficiently, adding a specialized shut-off valve that would cut flow to the illegal line without disrupting Tom's own water supply. They also added pressure sensors and flow meters that would document exactly how much water was being diverted. Never seen anything quite like this, admitted the lead plumber as they finished the installation. Lady must be desperate or crazy to steal water so blatantly. Tom also filed formal complaints with the County Water Authority, the Sheriff's Department, and the Environmental Protection Division. The latter took particular interest when Tom mentioned seeing Karen dispose of pool chemicals near the groundwater recharge area. The next morning, Tom activated the shut-off valve. The effect was immediate and spectacularly effective, cutting off all water to the illegal line while maintaining Tom's supply. Then he waited, security system alerts enabled on his phone, for the inevitable confrontation. He didn't have to wait long. Karen appeared at his door less than 2 hours later, still wearing gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. Gone was any pretense of neighborliness. "What have you done?" she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "My fountains have stopped working. My Italian cypress trees are going to die without their specialized irrigation system." Tom remained calm. "I've stopped you from stealing my water. That's all. You can't do this to me. Do you know how much that landscaping cost? Over $30,000. I'll sue you for every penny." "Karen," Tom said evenly, "I have documented proof that you illegally tapped into my well, stole thousands of gallons of water, trespassed on my property repeatedly, and caused damage to my equipment. I've filed reports with every relevant authority. You're facing potential criminal charges." For a moment, Karen seemed to deflate as the reality of her situation sank in. Then her eyes narrowed. "Turn the water back on. Now, or you'll regret it." "That's not going to happen," Tom replied firmly. "And if you're making threats, you should know that this conversation is being recorded." Karen's laugh was unsettling. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. This isn't over." As she stormed back to her property, Tom wondered what she meant. He didn't have to wait long to find out. That night, someone slashed the tires on his truck. The security cameras had been sprayed with black paint just before the incident, but Tom had little doubt who was responsible. The next day, he received notice of a lawsuit Karen had filed, claiming emotional distress and property damage due to Tom's harassment. The same day, Animal Control showed up, responding to an anonymous tip that Tom was abusing dogs, despite the fact that he didn't own any pets. The campaign of harassment continued for weeks. False reports to various authorities, garbage dumped on his property overnight, defamatory emails sent to neighbors from spoofed accounts appearing to be Tom's, each incident carefully executed to avoid direct evidence of Karen's involvement. But Karen had underestimated Tom's patience and determination. For every false report, he had documentation ready to disprove it. For every act of vandalism, he added another security camera. And with each incident, he updated his growing case file. The turning point came unexpectedly. Karen had continued to refuse to pay for the stolen water, telling everyone who would listen that Tom was persecuting her. Then one evening, Tom received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Harrington, this is Jacob Willis. I did some work for Ms. Westfield a few months back." The contractor explained that Karen had hired him to install the illegal water line, claiming she had Tom's permission. When he questioned the arrangement, she'd shown him a document that appeared to be a formal agreement between neighbors. Now, having learned the truth through community gossip, Jacob was racked with guilt. "I've never been involved in anything illegal before," he explained. "I've got signed work orders, text messages, everything showing she knew exactly what she was doing. I'm willing to testify if needed." With this final piece of evidence, Tom's attorney filed a comprehensive civil suit against Karen for theft of services, property damage, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The complaint included a detailed accounting of the stolen water, electricity costs, property damage, security equipment, and legal fees, totaling $27,438. Tom's attorney also prepared a settlement offer. If Karen paid $15,000 in damages, removed all illegal connections properly, restored Tom's property, and signed a legally binding agreement to cease all harassment, Tom would not pursue criminal charges. The certified letter containing this offer was delivered to Karen on a Tuesday morning. By afternoon, she was pounding on Tom's door, waving the papers wildly. $15,000? Are you insane? It's just water. It literally falls from the sky for free. Tom remained in his doorway, not inviting her in. "Well, water isn't rainwater, Karen. It's a limited resource that I paid to access. My well system alone cost over $20,000 to install. This is extortion," she shrieked. "No, it's consequences," Tom replied calmly. "You stole from me for months, damaged my property, threatened me, filed false reports, and harassed me continuously. The alternative to settling is a full civil trial, potential criminal charges, and the maximum damages, which would likely exceed $30,000. Karen's face flushed deep red. "I will never pay you a penny. Never. I'll fight this all the way to the Supreme Court if I have to." As she stormed away, Tom sighed. He genuinely hoped she would choose the rational path, but he was prepared for the alternative. The next day, his attorney filed the civil suit without amendment, and the sheriff's department formally opened a criminal investigation based on the evidence Tom had provided. Karen's response was to file for an emergency hearing before the HOA board, claiming Tom was conducting a vindictive campaign against her. The meeting was set for the following week. What Karen didn't know was that 3 other neighbors had come forward with complaints about her behavior, ranging from verbal abuse to encroachment on property lines. By the time the HOA meeting convened, the community's sympathy had shifted decisively against her. The HOA meeting became a turning point in the conflict. Karen arrived with a young attorney who appeared increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence against his client mounted. Tom presented his case methodically, backed by documentation, witness statements, and recorded conversations. Then, to Karen's visible shock, 3 other homeowners stepped forward with their own complaints. The HOA board voted unanimously to support Tom's position and place Karen on probationary status within the association, requiring her to adhere to strict guidelines or face expulsion. Karen's attorney, recognizing the overwhelming evidence, pulled her aside for a whispered conversation. Her face shifted through expressions of anger, disbelief, and finally, a bitter resignation. When they returned, the attorney requested a brief recess to explore settlement options. Meanwhile, The County Water Authority investigation had reached its conclusion. Their report was damning. Not only had Karen illegally tapped into Tom's well, but water quality tests revealed contamination from improper chemical disposal on her property. The Environmental Division issued fines totaling $12,000 and a remediation order requiring Karen to properly dispose of all chemicals and install monitoring wells at her expense. The criminal investigation resulted in charges of theft of services, criminal mischief, and trespassing. Faced with the prospect of a humiliating trial and potential jail time, Karen finally agreed to a plea deal requiring community service, probation, and full restitution. 2 days later, Tom received a settlement offer from Karen's attorney. She would pay $18,000 in damages, more than Tom's original request, remove all illegal connections, restore his property, and sign a non-harassment agreement. In exchange, Tom would drop the civil suit and support a reduction in the Water Authority's fines. After consulting with his attorney, Tom accepted the offer with one additional condition. Karen would have to formally apologize to him and the other affected neighbors at the next HOA meeting. The apology, when it finally came, was clearly painful for Karen. Standing before the community she had tried to manipulate, she acknowledged her actions in a stiff, rehearsed statement that nonetheless represented a public admission of wrongdoing. For someone so concerned with status and appearance, it was perhaps the most significant consequence of all. 1 year after Karen moved in, the neighborhood had transformed. Karen, unable to face the community after her public humiliation, put her house on the market. Before leaving, she complied with all terms of the settlement, albeit with obvious resentment. The $18,000 payment was delivered by her attorney, never by Karen herself. Tom used part of the settlement to install a state-of-the-art well security system that included underground sensors, reinforced housing, and remote monitoring capabilities. He donated $5,000 to the local water conservation district to fund education programs about groundwater protection and responsible usage. The HOA, learning from the experience, established clear rules about property boundaries and shared resources, creating protocols for addressing disputes before they escalated. Tom was asked to join the board, where his straightforward approach and commitment to fairness earned him respect. Perhaps most surprisingly, Karen's departure led to unexpected connections within the community. Neighbors who had previously kept to themselves began reaching out, sharing stories of their own difficult interactions with Karen that they'd been too intimidated to mention. She threatened to report my daughter's home business to the county for zoning violations if I didn't support her landscaping variance, confided Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly widow who lived across the street. I was afraid to say anything because she mentioned having friends in the zoning office. Similar stories emerged from others, painting a picture of a systematic campaign of intimidation that had silenced much of the neighborhood. With Karen gone, a palpable sense of relief spread through the community. In a final ironic twist, the new owners of Karen's property, a young couple with a genuine interest in sustainable living, discovered that her well hadn't actually been failing at all. Karen had simply never bothered to maintain it properly. A simple cleaning and pump replacement restored it to perfect working order. On warm evenings, Tom often sat on his porch, watching the sunset over his peaceful property. The ordeal had been stressful and at times frightening, but he felt a deep satisfaction in having stood his ground against someone who believed that rules didn't apply to her, that money and intimidation could substitute for integrity and respect. The expensive security cameras that had once seemed a necessary defense now captured more pleasant scenes: deer visiting at dawn, neighbors waving as they walked by, the changing seasons painting the landscape in shifting colors. Tom had protected more than just his water supply. He had defended the principle that even in small communities, justice matters. When the young couple who bought Karen's house stopped by to introduce themselves, they brought a homemade pie and a simple question. "We'd love to create a shared garden along our property line. Would that be something you might be interested in?" Tom smiled. "I think that sounds like a wonderful idea. Good neighbors are worth their weight in gold, or in this case, in clean, clear well water." The story of the water thief, as Karen had come to be known, became part of the community's folklore, a cautionary tale about entitlement and consequences that would be shared with new residents for years to come. and Tom, who had never sought conflict or attention, found himself regarded as something of a local hero, the man who stood up to a bully and won, proving that sometimes justice comes with a significant price tag for those who choose to ignore the rules of neighborly conduct.